At the beginning of the film, we are introduced to a couple, Thomas and Pippa, who have just moved into a new apartment. They seem very happy because the apartment is a place they have dreamed of for a long time. However, little do they know, this move will bring disaster into their lives. One night, while they are chatting about future plans, their attention is suddenly diverted by a light from the apartment across the way. Apparently, their neighbors are having a photo shoot inside the apartment. After that, they see the photographer and model start to open boxes, leading to a documentary video session in the room. Even though the view is free and entertaining, Pippa feels uncomfortable and urges Thomas to go to bed. The next day, Pippa goes to work as usual. Pippa works as a doctor's assistant at an eye clinic called L Optic. Her boss congratulates her on their move and gives her a bird feeder as a gift to hang in their bedroom window. Upon arriving home, Pippa immediately hangs the bird feeder in front of the window. Since their neighbors never close their curtains, Pippa and Thomas have a new hobby, watching that couple, whom they name Brent and Margot. One night, Pippa wakes up from her sleep and decides to get a drink. By accident, Pippa sees Margot leaving the apartment. Instead of going back to sleep, Pippa sees Brent. It seems that Pippa is attracted to the handsome and sturdy man in that apartment. Even the next day, Pippa deliberately buys binoculars to see their neighbor's expressions more clearly. That night, they are engrossed in observing their neighbor, who has a woman over. However, the woman is not Margot, but a young woman he has successfully seduced. Seeing this makes Pippa a bit pleased and she wants to play with Thomas while continuing to watch Brent with that woman. Unfortunately, Thomas's play ends faster than Brent's. Despite her disappointment, Pippa still appreciates her partner. Pippa's days are filled with continuously observing their apartment neighbors. A few days later, Pippa and her coworker were gossiping about Brent, the neighbor who loved doing photo shoots. People are never satisfied with what they have. The same goes for Pippa. Even though she can enjoy the free show, now Pippa wants to hear the neighbors' conversations, even though she thinks it's impossible. A friend then gives her the idea to use a laser pointer that can capture sound and reflect it. Pippa just needs to place a mirror in the couple's window. On Halloween, Brent and Margot coincidentally host a Halloween party in their apartment. This gives Pippa and Thomas the chance to sneak into Brent's apartment and place the mirror. After everything is set up perfectly, Pippa and Thomas start testing their plan, and it works. Now they can hear sounds from the neighboring apartment. By chance, they hear Brent and Margot having a fight. Margot is jealous because Brent is always close to the models he photographs. It turns out that Brent and Margot are a married couple. It seems in this film, there are too many coincidences. Have you noticed anything? If you're curious, let's continue the video. The next day, Margot comes to Pippa to have her eyes checked at the clinic where Pippa works. Now Pippa knows Margot's real name is Julia. Since they quickly become friends, they plan to go to a spa together at their next meeting. Meanwhile, Thomas, who is at home, sees Brent playing around with someone else. After Pippa gets home, she tells Thomas about Julia. Feeling that she and Julia get along and have become friends, Pippa now feels a moral responsibility to tell Julia about her husband's womanizing behavior. However, Thomas disagrees, feeling that Pippa is getting too involved in their household affairs. But, as women always feel they are right and don't want to lose, the second meeting of these two new friends finally arrives. Feeling close, they talk about personal problems and eventually discuss Brent, whose real name is Sebastian. At that moment, Pippa wants to tell Julia about Sebastian's behavior, but when Pippa hears that Julia loves her husband very much, she changes her mind. Even though Pippa and Julia have become friends, Pippa still continues her hobby of spying on Sebastian and Julia. However, since Thomas disagrees with continuing to meddle in their neighbors' affairs, Pippa does it secretly to avoid getting caught by Thomas. One night, when Thomas is sound asleep, Pippa starts her hobby again. For some reason, she feels the urge to tell Julia about Sebastian. Pippa manages to send a message through the Wi-Fi printer in Julia's apartment. Suddenly, Thomas wakes up and catches Pippa. Thomas is clearly angry because Pippa is still meddling in other people's household affairs. Pippa argues that she has to do it so Julia won't keep getting cheated on. The next morning, Pippa and Thomas make up. Pippa promises never to spy on their neighbors again. However, while they are hugging, Pippa sees something beyond her expectations. Julia is lying in a pool of blood, and Sebastian is trying to help her. Pippa didn't expect her good intentions to bring disaster to Julia. Thomas, who was initially thought to be good, turns out to be a coward. Feeling confused and afraid that they caused Julia's death, Thomas cruelly leaves his lover and asks to break up with Pippa. Since being left by Thomas, Pippa feels frustrated. However, she continues to spy on her neighbors to see how Sebastian is doing, who also seems depressed over Julia's death. Coincidentally, that night Pippa sees Sebastian going to a bar, and she follows him from behind. At the bar, Pippa keeps an eye on Sebastian until their eyes finally meet, and Sebastian approaches Pippa's table. They start talking as if seeing each other for the first time. Their conversation turns personal. Somehow, Sebastian manages to persuade Pippa to go to his studio. At first, they had a normal photo shoot session. However, little by little, Sebastian managed to photograph Pippa in a different style. Like a widower meeting a widow who has been holding back her hunger for a long time, they started to get intimate and spent the night exhausted. Elsewhere, Thomas decided to return to the apartment to apologize to Pippa. But, Thomas couldn't find his lover. Thomas drank as usual, but the water tasted different, and he decided to pour it into the bird feeder hanging outside. At that moment, Thomas saw his beloved engaging with Sebastian. The next day, Pippa returned to the apartment and was shocked to find Thomas hanging lifeless. A few days later, unable to bear the burden, Pippa confided in her best friend about everything that had happened. Her best friend tried to calm her down and assured her that none of it was Pippa's fault. Her friend even encouraged Pippa to be with Sebastian since they were both single and left by their lovers. They decided to attend Sebastian's photo exhibition, which would showcase his latest work titled The Voyeurs. The initial intention was for Pippa to forget her sadness by meeting Sebastian. However, suddenly, the photo exhibition took a dramatic turn. Sebastian called someone to join him on stage. Pippa was very shocked because that person was Julia, who Pippa thought was dead. When the curtain covering the photos was pulled back, it revealed photos that depicted Pippa's life. Starting from her happiness when she first moved into the apartment, to the tragic end after Pippa started meddling in other people's affairs, which led to Thomas losing his life. It turned out that the room Pippa rented belonged to Sebastian and Julia. They had been doing the same thing, observing Thomas and Pippa's life to create an art piece like this. Seeing this, her heart shattered. Pippa then went into Sebastian's apartment. In a hidden room, Pippa found the equipment Sebastian and Julia used to spy on her. Pippa destroyed all the equipment there. The next day, Pippa decided to move out of the apartment. When Pippa was about to take her bird feeder, she was shocked by the number of dead birds after drinking from it. Finally, Pippa realized that Thomas did not commit suicide. Elsewhere, the couple had just returned from an interview. They received a gift of very expensive alcohol. Thinking it was from an acquaintance, they enjoyed it without suspicion. Shortly after, their printer buzzed, and they received a message that they were the ones who killed Thomas. They immediately searched around the apartment and saw Pippa watching them. Wasting no time, Sebastian and Julia chased after her. Pippa kept running, evading their pursuit until she was cornered at the clinic where she worked. There, Pippa revealed her thoughts about Thomas being murdered by them. Feeling outnumbered, Julia spilled everything. It turned out that everything Pippa had experienced was part of Julia's plan. Julia also explained about the sleeping pills put in Thomas's drink. After he lost consciousness, Julia hanged him to make it look like a suicide case. However, without their knowledge, Pippa had used the same method, causing them both to lose consciousness. Finally, Pippa was able to take revenge for her suffering all this time. By making them blind, they could no longer see the beauty of the world forever.